And we are live.
I will call this Charter Review Commission of February 23, 2023 to order. And it is 5:05 p.m. Elizabeth, will you take the roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Chair Long,
Here.
Commissioner Ives,
Here.
Commissioner Deerdeck,
Present.
Commissioner,
Oh,
is she excused?
We couldn't hear
we
you.
lost you for a minute and we've lost our video too. So repeat that name.
I called Commissioner Blondis.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Neil,
I think that was Granillo.
Present.
is he here? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya,
Here.
Tees,
Present.
Commissioner Pettis,
Present.
Commissioner Pettis,
Present.
Commissioner Amador Guzman.
She is not here. We have not heard from her, so we're hoping she arrives late.
Okay, thank you. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We are.
I will go check on that now. Yes, let me just go check.
Yeah, can you hear us, Elizabeth?
Yes, but it's cutting out a little bit. Heard Connor say he's going to go check something.
Okay.
It might be just on your end, Commissioner Martin. You wouldn't be able to participate through Zoom or through YouTube, so perhaps best for us to wait and make sure it's not a problem on our end.
Okay. Right now, just let me know. Thanks for calling me Commissioner Martin, but I'm not a commissioner, but thank you.
Alrighty, so just spoke to Ben and he just reiterated, if everyone could just speak as such into their microphone when you do speak, if you could really put your mouth very close to the microphone, that'll help the audio. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will move on to approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Was that Commissioner Deerdeck?
Yeah.
Second by Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
aye.
Madam Chair, oh yeah, never mind. I'm sorry.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
You don't have to do a roll call, but you weren't anyway.
Next on our agenda is approval of minutes, and these are the minutes from our February 9, 2023 Charter Review Commission meeting. Does anyone have any revisions they want to suggest for the minutes? And if not, a motion to approve.
Move to approve. Blondis. I'll second that, Bettis.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve the minutes and it's been seconded. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's go on to public comment on our agenda. Is there anyone present for public comment, Connor?
Chair Long, Commissioners, yes, there is someone present to make public comment in addition to the written comment that was received. Adam Johnson is here and I'm going to promote him to a panelist. Takes just a moment. All right, Mr. Johnson, you are now a panelist and we should be good to go.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, thank you, members of the commission, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for your time and work on this commission. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Old Santa Fe Association. I spoke last session inquiring about the quasi-judicial process used in land use cases in the city. And I see the usefulness of quasi-judicial processes in general, but recent cases on Old Pecos Trail and South Meadows Road, which have brought excuse me, planning commission and governing body hearings into the wee hours of the morning, have shown us some of the shortcomings of the quasi-judicial process. The shortcomings were apparent in these high-profile cases of exemplary public interest because elected officials were restricted from hearing from their constituents in matters that were not simply about a single property rezoning, but rather about issues that impact Santa Fe more broadly. From my perspective, each case brought up issues about the balance of public goods, in particular affordable housing and open space, and how both of these goods keep Santa Fe, the city, different. So what I did is, using your current slate of questions as a model, I attempted a write-up of the topic that I'd like to submit for your consideration. Unfortunately, I was unable to submit this to the portal today, so I'll read it out here and email it to you immediately following this meeting. Although if there is a chat function or a way to distribute it to you, I'm happy to paste it for one of the staff. But this is the question posed in the model that I take from your own. Is the quasi-judicial facts
You're kind of freezing intermittently, Adam.
Yeah, start from the beginning of that, of
the question itself?
yes.
Okay. Is the quasi-judicial status of land use cases wherein commissioners and/or elected officials weigh facts prepared by the applicant, and then the body applies those facts to a prescribed legal standard, appropriate in cases of exemplary public interest and with potential impact to citizens and property owners beyond the area of the subject property? In other words, should the quasi-judicial status be employed in land use cases on projects that will significantly reshape an area of the city or override previously adopted standards or overlays? Or would another model in which commissioners and/or elected officials exercise discretion and the balancing of competing concerns better serve Santa Fe in these cases? That's the end of the question. I would welcome the city attorney and her staff to represent the question in a form that is acceptable to this body. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else, Connor?
There is no one else on the Zoom, Chair Long. Once again, there was written comment distributed via email from Burl Breckner, but there is no one else on the Zoom.
Okay, yeah, and I did read that comment. I think we all did. Okay, we'll go on to action items discussion. And these will be our subcommittee reports. The first is the Subcommittee on Governance Issues and Financial Audit. Included in this committee's topics are many: the appropriate number of city council districts, the appropriate number of city councilors per district, whether a city councilor who has lost a campaign for mayor should be permitted to remain in office after the inauguration of a new mayor, whether the charter should dictate the city's board and commission organization, whether the city's mayor should have a purely executive role rather than both legislative and executive roles, and if so, what new rights and limitations should be adopted along with such a separation of powers, whether councilors should be full-time, whether the roles of the mayor, councilors, and city managers should be better defined, and if so, how, and whether the charter should address additional financial management matters. So let's hear from the subcommittee. I assume you all have talked about how to present your recent work.
Thank you very much. This is Paul Deerdack. You will remember that at our last meeting, we described some of the items which we had developed considerably by then. I don't think I should repeat all of that, but I should tell you what we've accomplished since then. We've divided the list in three categories. The first category are strictly those in which we are recommending charter amendments. Of all of these topics, there are three where we are recommending amendments. Then there's a category where we considered the matters carefully and decided that they do need to be addressed, but they are not properly constitutional issues. And so that will be a matter of our presenting recommendations to the council for their consideration and for their action if they choose.
Commissioner Deerdack,
Yes.
you're cutting everybody is. So, and I'm sorry to ask you this, but you said you could, on the second, carefully the issues and are going to make recommendations to the council. Did I miss a clarification word?
You did not. What the second category are items on our referral list that we considered and decided were not properly charter amendments.
Oh,
But-
okay, that part.
Council should consider, and we will make recommendations and describe our rationale.
Okay, got it.
The third category are a number of items which we believe are either not timely at this time, or are items which simply do not belong in a charter at all, and we make no recommendation. And there's a few items there. So if you like, I think what I would do is emphasize the first category and then cite the second category quickly.
Let me ask you about the third category, not timely, or there will be no recommendation. Is that what you said?
Correct. And I don't think there needs to be a mystery there. There are two items on the list which we've already discovered are either not constitutional and would require a constitutional amendment, or in another case, there is case law which prohibits the action that was being requested. And with all else that we want the council to refer to the voters, we would think that developing recommendations on those two is of a much lower importance.
The reason I was asking the question is the resolution that establishes us says that we shall make recommendations on all of those following topics. So if any of those topics in that third category of yours are ones from the resolution, then I read it that we need to make a recommendation. But I think we could be just saying it a different way. The recommendation would be, don't do anything because.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will do that.
I think we still have to address it.
Right. Great. Let me turn then to the three where we do think that there will be recommendations. The first one, and I should say at this point, Madam Chair, that the agenda renumbers and reletters the items from the referral that we got from the council. And in our committee, we have kept all the designations as we got them from the council so as not to get confused from addition to addition. So unless you want me to follow this order for the sake of the agenda, I'm going to skip around.
And skip around.
Yep, there we go. So the first item that is a recommendation, you've already heard us talk about it. It is items D and F from the council's docket. And in this case, it is about the roles of the three branches of government and describing the three branches of government. We propose that Articles 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the charter be replaced by a single Article 5, and that it would be entitled something like governance. And therefore, it would have a section on the legislative branch, a section on the executive branch, and a section on the judicial branch. There will be very few changes of the current charter's separate and individual provisions. They will simply be put in a different order. And there will be a description of what we mean by separation and balance of powers at the beginning. The legislative branch, I don't think there is much change to that one. In the executive branch, we describe, as does the model charter document on number 9. I think every member of the commission has been consulting that. We follow their lead, and what they do is they divide very clearly between mayoral and managerial duties. The mayor is described as being the chief executive officer. The manager is described as being the chief operations officer. We think that language is more descriptive and immediately accessible to the public than the language that's used in our charter now. We've also been very careful. When a verb appears in either the manager or the mayor's description, we don't allow it to crop up in the other one. And that in the present charter, the verb to administer appears all over the place. And that tends to create confusion as to which function is expected of the two different roles. So we've cleaned that up. In the case of the mayor, there are a few items that we do think need to be a little more explicit. We have found that there are some cities that expect the city manager to be the person who attends each council meeting and responds to questions and presents material, including particularly the budget that the manager has developed with the department heads. We expect the mayor to be what the model charter calls the facilitator in chief of major issues of the city with all the stakeholders of the city. And the mayor only is a member of the governing body in two instances. To break a tie is one, and the other, as Mr. Johnson just referred to, when the city council sits as a quasi-judicial body, meaning it handles an appeal and is an appellate body, then best practice requires that everyone who has or could have a vote on the matter hears all the business. And so you'll see in our material, when you get it, that we're expecting that the mayor would participate in that entire proceeding when an appeal of a land use decision, is a perfect example, is before the body. Otherwise, the council will select from among its members someone to chair its meetings, and the staff person that will assist them at every turn will be the manager, because that's the way those functions are. These two roles will be defined with lots of definitional terms, but I'm not going to go there at the moment. There's the other place where the mayor's language changes just a little. It already says that the mayor hires the city attorney, the manager, and the clerk. But the model charter raises a very important issue that has been experienced by many cities. This is anecdotal experience that they've collected. It's not some formula. And so the experience has been that when mayors across the country hire city attorneys, there is a tendency by either the public or the council to think that the city attorney is a part of the executive branch and works for the mayor because the mayor has the power to hire and fire. And that has become a source of confusion when the attorney really needs to give best advice to all entities of the city, nonstop. And so what charters have done to make the independence of that role clearer is to say that the mayor hires the city attorney with the consent of the council And when it's necessary to dismiss a city attorney, also does so with the consent of the council. That's a slight change from our charter. In our charter, presently, the mayor has sole authority to dismiss. With regard to the other two roles, we're proposing no change. That the mayor hires with consent of the council and has sole authority to dismiss. So those are the only two changes really that you'll see with regard to the mayor. We've been very careful to present separation of powers within a strong mayor form of government. We do not think that what you have on your agenda as item G, whether the roles of the mayor, councilors, or managers should be better defined and how. And then in E, it says whether the mayor should have a purely executive role rather than both with a legislative role. We don't think that those two questions invite us to reverse the work of the previous charter commission that created a strong mayor form of government. Stripping away powers and duties from one role and adding them to another to simply reverse that process doesn't seem to us to be the charge that we were given. We were given a charge to clarify the roles so that they function, so the people in those roles know where their roles start and stop. So that's what we're doing. I am ready to move to another item that we will be recommending, but I'm going to pause here to ask if either Maria or Lily Mae or you, Alicia, would have any additions to what I have said.
This is Commissioner Montoya. No, nothing to add.
All right. Another item which we believe should be a proposal comes with a matter, Commissioner Ives, I don't know if this was referred to your committee or ours. I believed it was referred to ours. This is the question of the public rights of referendum and initiative. Okay. So in that case, we noticed there's an interesting coincidence in our charter, and it is also a coincidence in many charters, that the signature threshold that must be achieved to put a referendum or an initiative on the ballot is the same percentage as is used for recalls. That happens, everyone. I mean, there are a lot of cities that do it that way. We noticed that one of the public comments that we received was to pay attention to all three of them. And in our discussion, we decided there's a distinction between initiative and referendum on one hand and recall on another. With regard to recall, our member said it best. She said that the public who votes has a recourse almost immediately, meaning the next election. And so the threshold for recall needs to be really high, because when the voters decide that an elected is richly entitled to being removed, then the voters can go to the polls and see to it. And so having that as a high threshold, which tends to reduce the frequency of such things happening because they are very disruptive, we believe that the present charter is where it ought to be at 33%. In the other two cases, however, initiative and referendum, the voters may very well think that they did elect the council they wanted to elect, but on some particular matter, it's not getting on the docket. And they want to have access to the ballot. And so we think that it makes sense to reduce the threshold in those two cases. We looked at a website, and you'll see the reference in our written report, that compares thresholds, signature thresholds across the country. And in cities and in states, the lowest threshold that adjudicatories use is 2%. And it's quite frequent that a higher percentage goes up to 15. And so we will be bringing you a recommendation that in the case of referenda and initiative, we'll be recommending 15%.
Just to help me, can you explain the difference between referendum and initiative? Referenda?
Maria.
Thank you, Chair Long. So the difference between the two is referenda is when the governing body passes, votes on a bill and passes it, and the public is just not happy with that. So it's sort of like the ability for the voters to express their displeasure with some bill that's been passed and sort of like a recall of that bill that's been passed by the governing body. The initiative is the process where the governing body is not even willing to put an issue up for a vote that the public wants to have a say on. So if the governing body is not responsive to their voters, to their constituents, then the voters can just gather enough signatures to put that question on the ballot, bypassing the governing body.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
So our final matter for proposing a recommendation is what Lily May described very completely at our last full commission meeting. And that is to introduce an article in the charter that has to do with financial matters. And we look carefully at what the model city charter did. They produced a long chapter, 20-some pages. But if you go through that chapter and strip out the long passages of commentary and just look at the articles that they recommend, it becomes a much more manageable document. It's 3 pages, more or less. And it does, and I read it so carefully, and I noticed an exquisite ability to distinguish between ordinance policy and procedure on the one hand and constitution on the other. I can't imagine doing it better. But what they do is they also distinguish between the public engagement process in building a budget versus the public engagement process in building multi-year financial decisions, particularly in terms of capital outlays. And those are 2 different processes as lined out, and it provides the public with a roadmap for how to be engaged, and it provides the governing body with a roadmap of how to engage the public. And so that is what the model calls constitutional. And frankly, we read it carefully, and we would like to pass along to the council that text. And if they see sentences that they think are adequately covered in ordinance, they may decide to leave them in ordinance and strike them from charter language, but that's up to them. It's our attitude that these things are the way they are constructed. They're worthy of the public's vote. So those are the 3. Lily, May, any additions to what I have said about that?
No, I think that captures it, but I think it's important that you say that the councilors can decide if they want to pull stuff up, because I think once you start deleting sections of the 12 sections, then you're going to lose the full picture at the full process of what should be done, and it should be in the charter.
Yeah.
Either all should be there or it's absent now, and so it's a matter of do we put it in, or I hope that an ordinance covers it. And I think it's very clearly charter material. So,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, thank you.
So with that, let me go more quickly. There are a number of items where we simply make recommendations that we don't think rise to the level of constitutional matter. We were asked if there should be full-time counselors. And once again, we don't see that is of a, it doesn't seem like a timely matter to us. That's something that when this city is a good deal larger, the city might want to consider. But we do have one recommendation, and that is until we are of such a city, then we do recommend that they take a hard look at the budgetary implications of having staff assigned for these counselors, and that we as a group of citizens looked at that and saw the wisdom of that. But that is an implication of their referral, and we appreciated the implication. We thought it is not time yet in the history of Santa Fe for them to go full time. So that is their referral E. Another referral came through our own process. It arose from among us as commissioners, and that is whether or not there should be some means for boards and commissions to sunset when they become less active or useful. And again, we think the council needs to have a procedure about that. We don't think that's a matter of constitutional work. The third one is that this emerged from our own conversation within our subcommittee. You'll remember that we've got a huge question that's been posed to us about the number of districts. Doing that a year after the city has redistricting seems to us to be colossally backwards. And so we simply will recommend that the timing of both of these processes is strictly a matter of when the council convenes them. And we would recommend that they convene them in the opposite order. That would make the deliberations of the Charter Commission be grounded in what is functional versus what is dysfunctional about how the city is organized, as opposed to an academic exercise. Then, of course, we get to this one I just mentioned. In our report, you will see the considerations that we entertained and the calculations that we entertained when we considered the number of districts and the number of counselors per district. We're not simply going to put a bald sentence in front of you, we're for it or we're against it. There's going to be all of that description of our discussion. At the end of the day, our recommendation to you will be that changing the number of districts or changing the number of counselors inheres all kinds of disruption in the life of the city, and the benefits incurred by doing so are minimal. There are benefits, and people who struggle with it wind up with strong feelings about it. But when we looked at it, we believe that at least in this moment, in this decade, having this many districts and getting the political benefit of having 2 counselors per district so that the public is that much more represented in government speaks well for this city. And you will see our logic that if this city were some larger creature than it is, it would certainly behoove the city to take a hard look at that. It's not as though it's irrelevant. It's at what threshold does it become so relevant that it's worth the burden? That's the question. And we met this last week, and before that meeting, we were looking at 2 options. One would have changed, one did not. And as we analyzed the 2 options, we chose the one that I've just described. I think that pretty much gets us there, unless I'm mistaken. So here are some that
Me, Before you continue, just ask about the issue of whether a city councillor who has lost a campaign for mayor.
Right, that's coming.
Okay. It's coming. Just hadn't checked it off my list.
Yeah, you knew that that was a big one. I think I should first, just to keep things in order, I should go to the one that is, do we recommend at-large council members? This is one of those where there's case law that says we wouldn't get there even if we wanted to. So that one is not happening. Now we get to the resign to run, which is the one you asked about. And in that one,
It really is, as was pointed out by our public comment, the way it was posed to us, you could do it either way, but it's resign after you lose.
Yeah.
But probably it's different, but I think it's a lot of the same considerations, right? Because if you're running a campaign and you think, jabs are going back and forth because of that, and then that will continue, if they stay on the council, I think that was the issue. So I think the problem really is the same for both, but maybe it's a little bit different because of the mayor's ability to appoint,
right,
the vacancy and so on that doesn't occur until after the election. But that's the question that was posed to us, is after the mayor's inauguration, this council would have to resign.
thank you. And thank you for that clarification, because we will carry that forward in our written material. I understand why we took the shorthand, because the literature is full of discussion about this, and they use that shorthand to discuss it.
It is. It's a catchy phrase.
It sure is. Okay, so we won't do that again. But frankly, we discussed it at length, and there were some opportunities to game out what that sequence would look like in real life. And we thought of the people who have held these positions in our city council over the last, I think among us, we know 4 mayoralties, maybe more. And frankly, I hate to characterize it, but it really seemed like a solution in search of a problem. And we believe that the people who our voters elect are the people who ought to sit on this dais. And when the circumstances of election make that complicated, it's exactly what democracy does. And so we got kind of ideological about it. And so I don't know if you want me to include an editorial in the report. I'll bet you don't, but I sure could write one on this one. I think we already mentioned term limits and recall provisions. That is about it, I think. Committee members, anything? Did I drop any stitches?
Commissioner Durdek, I don't think you actually mentioned the term limits right now, but it's point of clarification. It's the same. We've been advised by city attorneys that there's case law where it's not allowable by state law. So we're not going to be
Or municipalities. Yes. Okay. Well, this committee has been doing a lot of work, and I want to thank you. And it's really very interesting, and we can tell that you're taking a very complete look at it and engaging in a lot of interesting discussion, I know.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I just might add, first of all, Paul, you did a great job explaining all of the different issues, because there's many and there was multiple conversations, and it's been like herding cats trying to gather everything, but you did a good job in doing that. And for the community, whoever's listening, in terms of transparency, I want them to understand that our committee has worked to add value and to look at what the city charter currently contains and what model best practices dictate, to see how we can improve our city charter by adding value, by building upon the strengths of the current city charter, and by building upon the work of different groups like the Redistricting Commission. And so I just have to say that we would appreciate any comments individuals have to the conversation that Paul just presented, that reports on what we were discussing, so that we can move forward and maybe adapt and adjust something that we may have presented. But I think we're excited about what recommendations we can give to the council. And of course, after that, our work is done and they can move forward. But the more insight and the more feedback we get from community members, the better our work product will be. And so I just wanted to thank Paul and the other committee members. It's been really an enjoyable process so far. So thank you, Paul. Thank
Thank you.
you, committee members.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to the subcommittee on human rights and social issues.
Madam Chair, before moving
Yes.
on, did you want to take any questions on the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Questions, discussion, thoughts?
I just had a few quick ones.
Okay,
I know Commissioner Durdock had indicated that the committee had chosen to not consider sort of going backwards in terms of the latest round of charter commissions. When I've read the resolution, I certainly don't see that limitation in there. So from my perspective, certainly the committee would be free to consider those types of issues. They certainly understand not wanting to take those up or not determining that that's not the direction you want to go. But I think in terms of the permissibility of consideration of that type of circumstance, I think that actually is on the table, because the resolution does call for not only what the council put forward, but also what commissioners bring forward and what the public brings forward. So just an editorial note on that one point. I can speak with some experience to this question of resigning a position, having been in that exact context in the mayoral run that I had was involved in. And I will say the mayor and I got along during the entire election campaigning season. He felt comfortable enough with our relationship to appoint me as the chair of the Public Works Committee, and we worked very successfully through that point in time that I ended up leaving council. So I would agree, hopefully the people of Santa Fe, they elect folks who at some level can get along, focus on the business at hand, as opposed to ad hominem attacks on each other. So just a real example. The one other item I had, and this was this language it's in the referendum and I think the recall both, where they talk about the 10% of the voters for mayor in each council district in the last mayoral election. And I wasn't sure if that's going to be part of your consideration if you're in the recall area. We know that there is significant differences in voter turnout in the different districts, and whether that impacts a decision to keep that language in there or not. I just hope that it's something you look at and do have an opportunity to report out on.
Will do.
Yeah, because when I saw that at our last meeting, it was the first time I'd ever really focused on that particular provision. And I'm still not sure if I fully understand the impact of it, but enough said.
Thanks.
Those were the only questions and points I had. Thank you.
May I respond, Madam Chair? Commissioner, when you and the mayor found yourself in a post-election relationship, your citizens were watching and we were delighted.
Good. As it should be.
Any other questions or comments about this committee's report and work at this time? Okay, well, let's go on to the Subcommittee on Human Rights and Social Issues. They have been assigned the topics of whether the human and civil rights policy statement should be more specific with regard to the breadth of required protections and or the manner in which such rights should be protected, whether the charter should provide protections for agriculture, whether the charter should allow voting beginning at age 16 in municipal elections. I'll turn that over to Commissioner Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But let me just lead off with a quick summary and then turn it over to the other commissioners on the committee. We have met, talked about all these issues, and just to deal with the last one first, because it's the easiest. The bill that was introduced in the House to reduce the voting age is in committee and has not been reported out. I believe it was Judiciary that it went to initially. So we're in a sort of holding pattern at this point in time. I am not sure if we would have the capacity, quite frankly, to change it to 16 if the legislature decided not to go that route, as that is such a significant item for the state, as opposed to the city as a charter city. So enough said there. If that changes, obviously we look forward to taking that up, and who knows, maybe we'll have a recommendation on that. I think it's safe to say that all of the members of the committee were certainly hoping that the legislature provided that opportunity so that we could see younger members in our community start to participate in the process of helping to govern and move our city forward. We think the earlier folks get involved, the better for all of us as a democracy. On number A, which is the Human and Civil Rights Policy Statement, we have been in discussions about recommending the potential creation of a Human Rights Commission at the city level. And we're certainly aware of the resolution that was introduced by 4 of the city councilors, focusing, the resolution itself focuses significantly on the obelisk and issues relating to that, but it certainly does go beyond that to talk about the Office of Equity and Inclusion and begin to flesh out some of those duties. Some of our discussion focused on whether that statement, the statement that would be made by having in the charter a Human Rights Commission created, was something that in many ways was appropriate for all the citizens of Santa Fe to participate in, because looking across the country and in the papers every day, these issues seem to only become more significant locally, regionally, across the state, across the United States, and across the world. So it's one of the most powerful statements we can make about the community by the community. So we're looking at that and looking at some of the sort of surrounding issues, what's appropriate to go in a charter if we did make that recommendation, as well as what might be appropriate in ordinances. So we may touch upon those types of issues in our reporting, because how you go about it is significant, and there actually is a good deal of material out there. The National League of Cities has materials, as do many different regions and governmental constructs across the country. So we've been in the process of reviewing those materials and looking at some of the, we want to understand it as a practical implementation process, as opposed to just a broad statement, we believe in human rights. Something I think we can all agree on, but we'd love to see a little more flesh on those bones. So that's where we are on that one. And then B, whether the charter should provide protections for agriculture. Again, all members of the committee strongly feel that hunger as an issue is in some ways relates to a fundamental right. That is, we should be able to ensure that our citizenry has sufficient food resources. We've seen reporting recently in the paper about the impact of in schools of kids that don't have food and how this affects their capacity to learn and to be educated. We also know that Looking at some of the statistics from the Food Depot, there remain significant portions of our community that do face hunger. So looking at a mechanism or a policy statement that elevates consideration of those issues, especially from the perspective of the sustainability of our community, we think will be very important. So again, we're looking at some of the practicalities of implementing that and the appropriate division between what should be or could be in a charter versus what would be put in place by ordinance. We only know based upon experience of the last ordinance that it was not successful and did not work. So we want to try and look at solutions to try and solve that problem and really provide some impetus to moving those reducing and eliminating hunger in a more significant way. And that's my reporting, but let me turn to my other committee members and invite everybody to elaborate or correct.
On the agricultural issue, kind of turn to hunger, it sounds like, would it be charter, some sort of charter direction that the city is to take the steps necessary to ensure hunger is addressed or food resources are available or something like that?
I think certainly that would be in the nature of an appropriate policy statement. And it's really a question of the level of detail. For instance, one way to implement a policy like that would be to try and have city land used for the construction of water-wise greenhouses using hydroponics or aquaponics. Of course, we have at this community college an entire program dedicated to that and a successful operation out there. So if we could in any type of language in the charter incentivize the use of city land for those purposes, as well as the making available of city water in appropriate circumstances where it is conserved and reused through many cycles as opposed to just once. That gives us, I think, those are some of the issues I think we're sort of trying to figure out.
Okay, very good.
May I?
Yes, please. Commissioner Pettis.
Thank you, Chair Long. So as to the first question, I think it was the first one that you mentioned, Commissioner, with the voting for our 16-year-old residents. You know, this is a confusing issue for me because it's sort of like sitting at the legislature and they may or may not consider it. I know that some cities have done this, and I have a question for our city attorneys about that, which I just don't have any idea how this would work, but how does voter registration happen for those folks who are not eligible to register to vote in statewide or federal elections? Like, if as a city we were able to pass this, to have this as part of our charter, that we do offer the voting franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds, would they register with the state? Would they register with the city clerk? Like, what would be the mechanism to get those folks, the folks who qualify to register to vote in those local municipal and school board elections to do so? And like, what's the burden and how does it work? I don't know if you guys can do a little bit of research on that.
Chair Long, Commissioner Perez. I'm clearly not Erin McSherry. I'm Pat Figali, I'm Assistant City Attorney. Ms. McSherry is not here tonight. I don't know the specifics of that. Marcos Martinez might have been looking into it. I can ask him. My guess is that it would be through the city clerk, but I am not sure, and we can look into that, certainly.
Thank you.
The registration would be through city clerk. If we were to lower the voting age for city elections, and it would only apply to city elections.
right?
Yes, how do we register now for the city? I don't know that I know that.
We registered with the state. We're registered New Mexico voters and then we're able to.
And
vote
so you
in-
show up to a city election,
For
you don't
registered
separately register, but you know, you have an address so they know what district,
Right,
ballot to give you.
but all of the registration for a local, from school board to presidential
So-
elections is.
Okay,
Through the state, right? So how would it work for a 16 or 17?
so we would have to have our own separate process for registering voters, is what it sounds like.
Possibly. I don't know if the state would register people for us for city elections.
I mean, right now, the state does register 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 for the next election, right? So you
Right.
can register as a 17-year-old and then once your birthday comes along, you can show up to vote. So is there a mechanism like that where you could register as a 16-year-old with the state? And then somehow, right, like the inner mechanisms of election administration would say, okay, this person is only allowed to vote for school board and city
Mhm.
local elections. So I just don't have the information on how that works in other.
Madam Chair, that analysis that I gave you all the last time on the 16-year-olds voting at the legislation that's introduced in the state has some information there, but the Secretary of State would be the one that would have that information. And I think a phone call to her office, because this is not a new initiative, they've had conversations about this year after year. She probably could shoot us some information on that. And because it would be through the state. So I think that would be the quickest way to get that information to help us.
Agreed.
see that.
Agreed. I just think she might be a little bit overextended at the moment. But somebody in her office might, yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? or Discussion on this committee? Yes, Commissioner Duda.
Commissioner Ives, as you develop the question of nutritional deficit and agricultural response, I'm not just speaking as a Santa Fe, and I'm speaking as a person who's dealt with that a lot all over. And in your supportive material, it would be really helpful to quantify the deficit and quantify the asset. What is the nutritional deficit of Santa Fe County? The Department of Agriculture has to keep track of that. They know. The reason every county in the country has a poverty line is that the Department of Agriculture knows what the nutritional deficit is for every judicatory. Then the next question is, what is your projection of how much production is even possible and what fraction of the deficit gets handled or not? But in your supportive material, I'm not saying this goes into a resolution, but the resolution is a lot more persuasive when both the upside and the downside are quantified.
Certainly agree and appreciate the recommendation to do that. We have looked at some of the Food Depot's statements of some of the deficits, but not necessarily nutritional deficit per se. So we will look for that. And my recollection is that adult nutritional deficits run into some 30% plus, and that school children was about 25% plus. I apologize, I did not bring that with us, or with me this evening, but it was significant enough to get one's attention certainly readily. So yes, we will look into that and report on it.
Thank you very much for your work. Yes, Commissioner Blondis.
I just wanted to add a comment in regards to the Human Rights Commission concept. And I spoke to a counselor who was one of the sponsors because I wanted to get a sense of what the potential for this office might be beyond the solution for the plaza. And he in fact reiterated their commitment, and really the city's concern is very similar to ours, in that whether you call it a Human Rights Commission or an Office of Equity, he foresaw this going on far beyond the solution to the plaza, and that it would be a functioning entity, and that it would address issues regarding equity and human rights. And at the same time, I foresee a real an importance in having it within the city charter, written so that it fits, that there would indeed be a commission that the city supports and wants to have and to continue for human rights and equity. And so for that reason, I think that's why we've been having a discussion about how to include that in charter language.
I'm glad that you were able to get some more information on what some of the counselors at least are seeing this office may be, their expansive, more expansive kind of nature. The charter does state that at the end of the Human and Civil Rights section, to affect these ends, and that's after all of the language about the protections, the governing body may enact ordinances and establish appropriate commissions with jurisdiction, authority, and staff sufficient to effectively administer this policy. So I think it's there. It says may. Are you thinking of something maybe that strengthens that language, that they shall, that it could be commissions or offices, maybe to cover this Office of Inclusion and Equity?
That would certainly be where I would be headed. I did speak to a Midwestern city this week as well concerning how their Human Rights Commission had been operational. I spoke with the city law office, and what I found was I was disappointed that it was really not the meaty kind of office that would be looking at events and proposed projects from an equity lens. And the attorney with whom I spoke said also the city was realizing that they needed to strengthen this commission from almost like I'm searching for the word, but it was not a commission that could act, or that had the power to do so, to carry the weight for city decisions, but that when a current office, which was vacant, was filled, that the city was going to go back and review and approach what we're trying to do right here. So yes, definitely, I would like to see shall in there, that it's in place, at least for 10 years.
Yes. Okay. All right. Any other discussions, questions about this subcommittee's work? Thank you all very much. Yes, Commissioner Pettis.
Add a little bit to give, I guess, the public and the colleagues here some context as far as what our conversations have been around. So as Commissioner Blandis just said, we're interested in having, if we're going to have an Office of Equity and Inclusion, or if it's going to be a Human Rights Commission, whatever it's going to be, we want a body that's going to have some teeth, right? So that it's not just aspirational and it looks good on paper, but that it actually is able to do the work, like Commissioner Blandis just said. So we've been talking about what it would look like to have an office particularly, right? Like a staffed city office of equity and inclusion, equity and sustainability, human rights, whatever you want to call it, right? But that it's that office really has serves an administrative function more than an aspirational function. So there's a mandate, right? A task, a thing that office needs to do, and that they implement it through administrative means, so that there's not question about like, oh, this project, like we're going to talk about it, that project is not important. Like every project goes through the same process. Every vendor goes through the same process. Every expenditure goes through the same process. Every hire goes through the same process. So it would be, we've talked about this, right? We haven't made a recommendation, but that's something we've been talking about. To have an office that has really administrative duties to try to bring equity to our city. Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is new topics for consideration by the commission. Are there any new topics? I will note that we've heard now from Mr. Johnson twice, and we really appreciate, his interest in our work, and the way I think we'll have to see the way he framed the possible topic, but Pat will know this more than anyone. There have been some very, I would say, large and land use cases that have gone to the Planning Commission and to the council recently. And so it has involved a lot of citizens of the city that have followed those and participated in it. And so I understand that coming on the heels of it, but I think there was a lot in that question or that concern, whether they should be quasi-judicial. These matters should be quasi-judicial. I think the concern is that maybe citywide interests aren't able to be addressed within the standards for those cases, and that maybe citizens were not given adequate time, which is more of a rules issue than a quasi-judicial issue. But maybe I can just visit with Pat about that and see if we can kind of unpack it, because there are some, requirements for those kinds of cases that we can't do anything about. They're going to be quasi-judicial if it involves a specific piece of property. But I think there was more to Mr. Johnson's question than just that. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that, Pat, but I was trying to think about what the concerns were in that issue with his question.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Long. I think that is a good assessment of, I believe, what he was saying. I do want to let you know that there is a Chapter 14 rewrite of the code, which is the land use chapter of the Santa Fe City Code, happening starting now. And some of the processes for hearings are certainly going to be discussed and looked at. There are some cases, as you know, that are required to be quasi-judicial because that's the type of case they are. But there are people looking at the processes right now. I don't know if the charter is the right place to address that, but we can certainly talk about it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I thought about that, so I'm glad you brought it up, because I attended that kind of kickoff meeting for the rewrite of that. And I think so did, I saw Commissioner Blondis on there. And I assume, that there'll be a lot of public participation in that process, including the old Santa Fe Association could also participate in that. So maybe processes, but also standards, so that these more expansive sort of citywide standards for certain cases, maybe that's something that could be also included in that code rewrite. So I think that's a very good point. Yes, Commissioner Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My recollection of the reporting in the paper is that the land use rewrite will run through 2026. So anything presumably that's going to be acted on may be 3 or 4 years away. So from my perspective, the possibility of addressing that in the context of this commission might make sense by way of providing guidance to that process, as opposed to taking it up 10
Well, that's
years
an
from now.
interesting idea.
So, yeah, different thoughts on timing and possibly contributing.
Why don't we, I'll visit with the city attorney's office about it and we'll try to get some more clarity on that for Mr. Johnson. Yes. Connor.
Chair Long, thank you. I did want as a piece of information to let you know that Mr. Johnson did email his prepared
Okay.
remarks to me, and I will distribute them among all the commissioners. So you can see what is written in Mr. Johnson's.
Okay. Thank you very much. And that'll be helpful when we talk about it. And we'll put it on the agenda maybe for next meeting. It will be next month then. Okay. Then are there any matters from staff? I know Connor has a matter at least.
Yes, there are matters from staff. And I will not take too much of your time, commissioners, but I am here this evening to let you know that tonight's meeting of the Charter Review Commission will be my last meeting as the Charter Review Commission staff liaison, as Monday, this upcoming Monday, will be my last day with the city. I am from Phoenix, Arizona originally. That is my hometown, and I've accepted a position back home. So I would just briefly like to take this opportunity not only to thank all of you, but to thank the entire staff of the city of Santa Fe and this entire community. It's been an honor and a privilege to live in the city different, and I will always cherish it. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Connor. We're very sorry to see you go, but it sounds like you're on to something in your hometown that you'll find fulfilling. We really want to thank you for all of your help. I mean, not just here at the meetings, but getting us prepared for the meeting and getting the agendas ready. And you've always been so responsive, and we will miss you.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. But as regards to the logistics of moving forward with the Charter Commission, Assistant City Attorney Fagali will provide some more context as to our next steps.
Okay.
So as to moving forward, we will have a new head of Connor's office. Can you help me with the title? It's the head of.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be the Office of Legislation and Policy Innovation Manager.
A mouthful.
Yes, so the new person for that will be starting the end of March. We do have an offer out. It is not finalized yet, but we will let you know when it is official. Up until then, at least, and perhaps after that, I will be the liaison to Subcommittee 1, which is, the governance issues and financial audit, and Senior Assistant City Attorney Marcos Martinez will be the liaison to the commission, Subcommittee 2 on Human Rights and Social Issues. And then City Attorney Erin McSherry will be the liaison to the chair moving forward.
Okay, very good. Right, are there any matters from the committee? Been a lot of them tonight, but are there any more?
May I add another? I'm sorry.
Yes, Commissioner Dack.
Madam Chair, when it is possible for you to do so, would you either reiterate or clarify what the deliverables are for the subcommittees in terms of when may we distribute written material and how?
Okay, well, that leads us right into matters from the chair. I was going to get to that. So I have spoken with Erin McSherry about how best we get to the finish line with this. And what we would like to see is written recommendations from the subcommittees. I don't want to say reports because that sounds kind of onerous. I mean, we need your recommendations with some, backup for that with, by, I think, our March 30th meeting. So we'd like that in writing. And if it's going to be on the meeting agenda, then, and go into what we call our packets, but get uploaded to Prime Gov, then we might want to have them the week before. Would that work, Connor? I mean, we'll talk about it next month too, but usually we can send out an email, but we need it a week ahead of time. So we're not asking for a perfectly written report. That will come the month afterward, but at least by the end of March, we would like to have a written report with some rationale for it. That doesn't mean you can't do something, ahead of time for our next meeting if you want someone to see it, but the 2 meetings in March are both, I think we've decided those are both virtual meetings by Zoom. So that'll be our next meeting is on the 9th. And then because March is a long month, we won't meet again for 3 weeks until the end of March. But if we need to schedule a special meeting in there sometime, we can do that to consider things. So if we get those written recommendations with some rationale for them and some of your analysis, then April will really be the month where we're putting the written report together. And Aaron has said that the city attorney staff and maybe the new liaison will help us with that writing. So hopefully with their help, we can get a draft to the commission, the first meeting in April with edits made and comments made and vote on a final report by the end of April. I think we have to get everything to the council. Our deadline is May 9, and there is a council meeting on May 10. So I don't know if that was the thinking that they wanted everything by the 10th. So don't you think? Yeah.
Long, just a point of clarification, we had talked about bringing a draft set of recommendations with some narrative rationale behind it for the March 30th meeting, a few days before, right? So that we can put it on the website and all that. But the point of that, at least partially the point of that, was to give the public access to our thinking. So I'd love to just put a pin on that in terms of, okay, we're gonna put our recommendations forward. That's gonna go to the public. How? And we had talked about maybe doing some work ahead of time to maybe put it in the New Mexican or do some radio interviews or whatever. But I want to make sure that following what Commissioner Ortiz said before, right? We really do need some feedback from the public, and it would be great to maximize those 2 weeks from our draft report being submitted to get that feedback from the public, and then we can have also feedback from our city attorneys, right? Like we might be putting out all kinds of stuff that they look at and they say, wait, what, right? So we need
It's a good point.
opportunity for the city attorneys and the public to say, wait, what, and give us some feedback. Thank you.
Yes, and we had talked about that. Yes, Pat.
Chair Long, Commissioner Perez. I think that might even be more helpful to do when the recommendations are made at the end of March, and not wait until the report has a draft form. And we might be able to use some city email chains and public relations. If you would like to do that, we can look into that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think once we have some of this in writing so that the public can actually read it and know what we're thinking and where we're headed and what the recommendations might be, that gives them something concrete to make comment about.
So that's
Even if it's not perfect.
Imperfection is exactly why I asked the question. It feels to me like there's a gap. If we as subcommittees put material before the full commission, then it's on the website for the full commission's meeting, and now it's a public document. Is there any way that what we intend to put on a website can be read by other eyes before we do? Or is that a violation of open meetings?
Okay, I know that Commissioner Ortiz had a comment first, and then we'll get to that.
Madam Chair, what I was going to throw out is we're running short on time, and there is a lot of specific work that needs to follow our general assumptions that we've outlined today. And I was going to suggest perhaps, rather than waiting for a formal report at the end of March where everything's pulled together and it's gorgeous and beautiful and a listing by the two subcommittees, that if there are pieces that are ready, for example, I'm going to state the financial piece is ready. It's been ready for some time. I just handed a copy to Commissioner Montoya of it. And it's straight out of a model practice. So there's not anything really that should be controversial. So I was going to suggest if there's pieces that are ready, and I would offer that one as the first one, that we have our attorneys look at it and then put it on the agenda for the next meeting instead of waiting for all these final reports, because
I think that's a good idea.
most of
if
the
there are
most of the
pieces of
subject matters can stand alone. And that one's ready. As a matter of fact, I'll be happy to give you a copy before I leave this evening of what it looks like. So maybe we could consider that and then have the attorneys look at it. And if it looks worthy, then it will be on the agenda for the March 9th meeting. And we can at least move forward on that one item, cross that off the list and move on to what other pieces that are already ready.
Sure. It doesn't have to be all at once. I think
No,
that's a
no,
good
I
idea.
think we're tying our hands and making it more complicated to do that. So let's just what sounds good and what seems to be working. And I think we've gotten agreement that that piece is ready to go.
Okay. And it really sounds like that, at least from what I was hearing from the Committee on Governance, that they've got some pieces too that are, other than the financial part, there's other pieces of it that are, you're kind of ready to
Very
go.
close. And I think, just to say, in the hearing of committee members, I think within a matter of days, I can circulate stuff to you in writing to subcommittee members and get an okie dokie, and we'll move it along. And what I just heard as the instruction is to send it from there to Pat so she can scan it.
Yes. Well,
And from there, Commissioner, then, once the city attorneys take a look at it, it gets put on the agenda for the next
The subsequent
full
meeting,
commission.
right?
And then it's public record, right? So then we can get public input that way.
yes. And
We'll
so,
have 2 meetings in March to do that. But I just wanted March 30th to be the deadline, because then we're running out of time. So we can certainly get pieces of it earlier. And I think that's a good way to do it, break it up.
Madam Chair, this is the financial piece right here. What I email, the process, what I email, because I've typed it all up, but I email it to you, to the attorneys, do I give somebody a hard copy and then follow with an email? Give me the process.
Just to your liaison is Pat. So if the rest of the committee is fine with that, then just get it to her and it'll be ready to go on the agenda. And because they handle the agenda, the city does, in terms of documents and uploading anything. So
I'm getting 2 heads nodded from our committee members,
Yeah.
3 heads, so we're good. Okay, I will get your email and get that to you and we'll have the first piece out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
it's great. Everyone's really moving along and I appreciate it. So we don't have much time. All right, our next meeting is Thursday, March 9th. And that is in 2 weeks. And as I said, it will be by Zoom, as is our second meeting in March. So we've got that break. We'll have 3 weeks after the March 9 meeting until the last Thursday of the month. So it'll be a good time to finalize any other reports that we need to and put any other work on the agenda. Okay, we will see you all by Zoom on March 9. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, everybody. That was a good meeting, really.